The summer evening had turned to night, and 17-year-old Marcus stood at his bedroom window, watching fireflies dance across the backyard. He couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong in the house, the way it sometimes does when you're young enough to sense trouble but old enough to understand it. His little sister Elena, just 9 years old, slept in the room next to his. She still had that innocent way of believing everything would work out fine, the way children do before life teaches them otherwise. Marcus wished he could protect that innocence a little longer. Their father had remarried 2 years ago, after their mother passed. Marcus still remembered his mother's gentle hands braiding Elena's hair, her soft voice reading bedtime stories. Their stepmother, Victoria, was different. Not cruel exactly, but cold. She looked at Marcus and Elena the way you might look at furniture someone left behind when they moved out. That night, Marcus had gotten up for water when he heard voices drifting from the kitchen below. His father's work had taken him to Atlanta for the week. Victoria was on the phone, her voice carrying up the stairs in the quiet house. "They'll be gone by the end of the month," Victoria was saying. "I've already contacted the boarding schools. Marcus goes to the military academy upstate, Elena to that place in Vermont. Separate schools, different states. It's better this way. When Richard gets back, I'll convince him it's for their education." Marcus felt his heart drop into his stomach. He stood frozen on the stairs, gripping the banister. "I know, Mother," Victoria continued. "I've waited 2 years, but I can't keep pretending to play house with his children. Once they're gone, it'll just be Richard and me. The way it should be." Marcus didn't wait to hear more. He walked quietly back upstairs, his mind racing. He thought about his father, who worked so hard he barely saw what was happening in his own home. He thought about his mother, who would have fought like a lioness for them. And he thought about Elena, sleeping peacefully, unaware that someone wanted to erase them from their own home. He made a decision then, the kind you make when you're 17 and the world suddenly asks you to be older than you are. Marcus packed quietly. 2 suitcases, the hard-shell kind their mother had bought for a family vacation they never got to take. He put in clothes, some photos, his mother's jewelry box he'd been keeping safe for Elena. He found the envelope his mother had left them, the one with some money she'd saved, tucked in his dresser drawer. She'd told him once, "Just in case you ever need it, sweetheart." Then he woke Elena. "Bug, I need you to get up," he whispered, using his old nickname for her. Elena rubbed her eyes, confused. "Marcus? It's still dark." "I know, sweetie, but we need to go somewhere. We're going on an adventure." Even at 9, Elena understood something in her brother's voice. She didn't ask questions. She just nodded and let him help her pack her small suitcase, choosing her favorite yellow dress with the flowers, her mother's photo, her stuffed rabbit named Mr. Whiskers. They left before midnight, walking down their street with their suitcases rolling behind them. Marcus had written their names on blue tags and clipped them to their clothes, something he remembered from when they'd flown to visit their grandmother years ago. It made them look official, like they were supposed to be traveling. The bus station was 3 miles away. They walked past sleeping houses, past Mr. Henderson's corner store, past the park where their mother used to push Elena on the swings. Each step felt like leaving behind pieces of their childhood. "Where are we going?" Elena finally asked, her small hand gripping Marcus's tightly. "Somewhere safe," Marcus promised, though he wasn't entirely sure where that was yet. At the bus station, Marcus bought 2 tickets to Riverside, a small town about 200 miles away where their mother's best friend, Mrs. Dorothy Chen, lived. His mother used to talk about Dorothy all the time, how they'd been friends since childhood, how Dorothy had the kindest heart of anyone she'd ever known. The bus arrived at dawn. They climbed aboard, 2 children with suitcases and name tags, looking like they belonged somewhere even though they were running from the only home they'd ever known. The driver, an older woman with silver hair and kind eyes, looked at them for a long moment. "You kids traveling alone?" Marcus stood straighter. "Yes, ma'am, going to visit our aunt in Riverside." The driver studied his face, then Elena's, and something in her expression softened. She'd raised 6 children of her own. She knew the look of kids carrying burdens too heavy for their ages. "Well, you sit right up front where I can keep an eye on you," she said gently. "Long ride ahead." They settled into seats near the front. Elena pressed her face against the window, watching the world lighten as the sun came up. Marcus kept his arm around her, feeling the weight of what he'd done settling over him like a blanket. The driver, whose name tag read Betty glanced at them in her rearview mirror throughout the journey. During a rest stop, she bought them breakfast sandwiches and orange juice, waving away Marcus's attempt to pay. "My treat," she said. "You remind me of my own grandkids." When they finally arrived in Riverside 7 hours later, Marcus felt exhaustion pulling at him. But they'd made it. Dorothy Chen still lived in the small blue house on Maple Street that Marcus remembered from one visit years ago. He recognized the rose bushes out front, the wind chimes on the porch that his mother had given Dorothy as a birthday gift. Marcus rang the doorbell, Elena standing close beside him, and waited. The door opened, and there was Dorothy, older now with gray streaking her dark hair, but with the same warm smile Marcus remembered. "Yes?" she said, then stopped, her eyes widening. "Marcus? Elena?" "Mrs. Chen." Marcus's voice cracked slightly. "I'm sorry to show up like this. We didn't know where else to go." Dorothy looked at them, at their suitcases, at the exhaustion in their young faces, and she didn't ask questions, not yet. She simply opened her arms and her door. "Come in, children. Come in." Over tea and toast in Dorothy's sunny kitchen, the story came out. Dorothy listened quietly, her hand covering her mouth at times, her eyes filling with tears at others. When Marcus finished, she reached across the table and took both their hands. "Your mother was my dearest friend," Dorothy said softly. "She asked me once, years ago, to look after you two if anything ever happened to her. I promised her I would. I'm so glad you remembered me, Marcus. So glad you were brave enough to come here." Over the following days, Dorothy made calls. She contacted Marcus and Elena's father, and the conversation was long and difficult. But she was firm. She explained what Victoria had planned, what the children had overheard. She told him his children had traveled 200 miles in the middle of the night because they didn't feel safe in their own home. Their father wept on the phone. He said he hadn't realized how bad things had gotten, how focused he'd been on his work, how he'd convinced himself everything was fine because he wanted it to be. "Let them stay with me," Dorothy said. "Not forever, but for now, while you figure things out." And so Marcus and Elena found a new temporary home. Dorothy's house was small but full of warmth. She taught Elena how to make dumplings from scratch, the way Marcus and Elena's mother used to make them. She helped Marcus study for his college entrance exams, encouraging him when he doubted himself. In the evenings, they'd sit on the porch with lemonade, and Dorothy would tell them stories about their mother as a young girl, full of dreams and mischief and joy. These stories felt like gifts, like pieces of their mother they'd never known they were missing. Their father visited every weekend, making the 4-hour drive. He'd separated from Victoria. He looked tired but lighter somehow, as if a weight had been lifted. He apologized to his children over and over, until Marcus finally said, "Dad, we just need you to be here now." 3 months later, their father found a new job in Riverside. He rented a small house 2 streets over from Dorothy's, and slowly, carefully, they began to rebuild their family. It looked different now, smaller, but it was theirs. Marcus and Elena never forgot that midnight walk with their suitcases, that bus ride at dawn, that moment of standing on Dorothy's porch, not knowing if they'd be welcomed. But they also never forgot Betty the bus driver buying them breakfast, or Dorothy opening her door without hesitation, or all the small kindnesses that had carried them through. Years later, when Marcus had children of his own, he'd tell them the story. He'd explain how sometimes life asks us to be braver than we think we can be, how sometimes home isn't a place but the people who choose to love you. And he'd tell them about the power of showing up on someone's doorstep and saying, "I need help," because that's what his mother would have wanted them to know, that kindness is real, that people can surprise you, that even in the darkest nights there are still fireflies dancing in the distance, small lights to follow home. And every summer evening, when Marcus watches his own children chase fireflies in the backyard, he remembers being 17, taking his little sister's hand and walking toward an uncertain dawn. He remembers being scared and brave at the same time. He remembers learning that sometimes the greatest love is knowing when to let go of what's hurting you and reach for what might save you. That's the story he tells. That's the wisdom he passes down. That's what remains, long after that midnight escape, long after the fear and uncertainty. The knowing that somewhere, always, there are people with open doors and warm kitchens and arms wide enough to hold children who need shelter from the storm.